Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to take a look on the configurations, what all we can pass, and we'll just deploy it. Okay. So I will just start with the very basic. So this is something global, and here we are going to write our own functions, right? So how these functions are configured, if you see, I have a handler.js. So I'm saying handler.hello. What we have in the handler is this hello function, right? Module.export hello is the function name, and same function name is defined here. And I mean, this can be anything. The handler for this function name is this. Okay. So what all kind of configurations we can add for a lambda? There are a lot many, like memory size, the timeout, right? Uh, Concurrency, reserved concurrency, provision concurrency, right? So if you are specifying anything here like memory size, let's say if I specify memory size 128, it will convert into 128 MB. Then this will be applied globally to all the lambda functions until unless you go and change it to your particular lambda and say, okay, I need 512 MB here. Okay, this applies for any particular rule. Here I'm specifying memory size, I'm specifying timeout. Let's say timeout is 10, so globally it is 10 seconds, but for this particular lambda I'm saying, okay, I need only 3 seconds, right? So in a particular lambda you can actually override the timeout configuration, memory configurations, and all the relevant configurations, right? Now how we can write multiple functions? Simple, right? We have the function which is a function 1. Similarly we can add function 2. It just, you need to write a proper YML. So let's call it as a function 1. And here we can call this as a function 2. Okay, I did some mistake. So we are calling it as a function 2 with the same set of configuration. Here handler can point to a different function, module.exports, right? So here we can write another function and we can point it to there. So that depends on your, when you have multiple functions, then ideally you should create a folder. Let's say I have a lambda folder. Inside this I can just put this handler, and first handler I will say function 1. Similarly I will just copy it and paste it for the function 2. So now we have function 1 and function 2. So here the handler, right? Handler, we don't have handler directly in the root. So we have to do lambda / function 1. Instead of handler, now it will become function 1. And we can still have the handler name as hello. Similarly, this will become function 2. And there is a hello function, right? So function 1 and function 2, there are two functions. Both are targeting to two different lambdas. So now our application will deploy two different lambdas. And we don't need 512 MBs and all these things. Default timeout, if you are doing some asynchronous request, then always keep the default timeout more than 3 seconds, because sometimes timeout will happen. So global timeout you can keep 10 seconds, and memory size is 128 MB. That is not much. Okay, you can add the other things like the description, which is optional property after handler, like what this function is actually doing, that you can add. And you can keep adding these functions, function 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 10 if you have 10 functions, right? The only thing is how you are writing your lambda. So lambda, typical code of lambda is something like this, right? If you have seen this in our previous example, handler is the file name and then there is a function one, right? So in this particular case what we will do is, if that is the case, here we will just put handler. If that handler is in the root, handler dot the function 1. right? Then handler.function2, something like this. So it depends on what function name we are doing in our code, and is there any particular directory also there that we can follow. Okay, so there are other things which we will also talk about, like the provider property and all we have already seen. So provider is like your AWS, Azure, it can be anything inside a services. Okay, the memory size, runtime is like to which Node.js version you wanted to deploy your Lambda. Okay, memory size and all these things we have seen. In the functions, you can also do the referencing. Referencing means like instead of writing all these, you can just simply say, I want to actually introduce these two files. I really like this approach, because when you have a lot of YML files, then you can actually do this something like this. So here there are foo function.yml and bar function.yml, and you can actually create your separate YML where you will not be specifying a lot of things. .yml, so it will look whatever the handler you need, like get foo, and this is the handler for that. I mean, handler now in our case is lambda function1.hello, lambda function2.hello, right? So what we will do is we'll just look at these basic configurations. Now next, I mean, I will deploy this. We can have two test functions, function1 and function2. We will test it by deploying. Next thing is the permissions. Permissions means your Lambda wants to talk to Dynamo, wants to talk to S3, wants to talk to SQS, SNS. How you can specify the permission and IAM role for your Lambda in the serverless.yml. That we will see in the next video. Thanks everyone.